wanted to give us a bit of background in terms of why we think this is an important topic for you all to really get embedded in. It has to do with the fact that science, in fact, has changed. There are sort of ideas of what science means. I don't know if you saw some of the recent feeds on social media about the science photos that come from stock photos. A lot of people staring at things, so there's sort of this impression that scientists just spend a lot of time staring at stuff, sometimes even chickens, as this is over there. But while the science itself has changed over the years, the ideas around what science actually entails, how we do it, really hasn't. So we still have impressions that basically you have a person staring at a test tube or staring at a Petri dish or staring at a computer screen in a lab, and that's basically it. And that's actually not even close to being true. Funding models for science have changed quite dramatically over the last 20 years, even more recently. We now have a balance between provincial, federal, and foundation-based sources, but also partnership with industry, which make the management and attraction of funding much more complicated than it was in the past. Skill sets vary quite a bit. Even in neuroscience, most of you here for the Canadian Association of Neuroscience meeting, within neuroscience, the skills that you need to do science are quite diverse. You have everything from molecular biology all the way up to statistics and informatics. And even ethics and so on are hard to sort of pull under one umbrella. So being able to manage those skills is quite important as well. More and more, science is moving away from having the individual investigator in his or her lab running studies. It's now become sort of a team effort. You actually are either encouraged or actually forced sometimes to set up collaborations with people you may not really know very well. And so being able to manage relations between other people in other labs is quite important. And not only that, but also managing the collaboration within your own lab is also quite an important issue. Big data is now becoming sort of a buzzword, as you know. The notion there is that you're using data that had been acquired elsewhere, and the idea is to try and pull these data together to be able to better understand what's happening in the systems you're studying. But accessing those data, being able to share the data between different individuals, being able to curate those data is in fact a management issue, and that's something we typically don't learn a lot about as scientists. Open science is in the same framework, sharing your data, sharing your protocols, being able to communicate effectively with stakeholders, whether that be other students, whether that be scientists, whether they be politicians, and so on, has become part of an important repertoire for scientists. And there's pressure, as we know, in science. Pressure all over the place. Pressure to show return on investment. I'm not going to talk about current politics too much, but there is a pressure, of course, to show that what's being invested in terms of the fundings coming from these grants from foundations actually has a benefit, a direct, tangible benefit to the end user, if you will, a benefit to technology, a benefit to economics. You have to find a way to show that what you're doing in the lab actually has some tangible impact. And that's not easy. Academic pressure, for those of us who are new faculty, there's a lot of pressure. You have to teach, you have to write grants, you have to recruit people into your lab, you have to sleep, you have to eat, manage your kids, and so on and so forth. That all happens within a 24-hour cycle, usually, maybe 28 hours sometimes, maybe 36. But the main point being is that management skills are, in fact, an essential part of doing science now. The challenge, of course, for us is that those of us coming into this, to doing science don't have the background in management. We know how to do experiments usually. We know how to write programs usually. Management skills, not so much. We don't get that information at all. So there really is an imperative to try and find ways to learn how to manage your operations. There was a great article actually published in Nature in 2018. The article goes through a lot of different points, and some of it's quite illuminating in the sense that it talks about the disparity between the impression that one needs to learn management skills juxtaposed on top of how senior the person is you're asking about that. So if you talk to PIs who are older, I'm kind of one of those people, I guess. A lot of us, the older folks, say, we figured it out. We already know how to do that. But if you ask the people that work with the PI, whether they actually are managed well, it's not quite the same message. You know, the old PI says, yeah, I see my data, I talk to my students all the time, I manage my funds well. You talk to the students or lab managers and they kind of go, well, not really. So there's first of all a discord, I should say, between the impression of the trainees and the other staff in the lab, as well as the PIs. There's also an acknowledgement of the need for training in management, and the survey data you see off to the side there suggests that there is in fact a need for training. There's a perceived need for training of that sort, but it's not there. There's very few institutes that actually provide that kind of training, so there is a gap that has to be filled. You'll see smatterings of these things within institutions. University of Toronto, for example, has pieces of programs, but it's really hard to pull together a focused effort on science management. So that's something we're hoping that this kind of event will sort of motivate various people to try and push this thing forward, so we have this available to most of us more going forward. So I want to just move now to the formal program itself. The presentations each will be roughly 15 minutes. There's a new player in this game, Kelly Shen, who's going to be their first presenter. She's a scientific associate at Baycrest, got a PhD in neuroscience from Queen's University. Has done a lot of work in non-human primates as well as human primates, and has been doing a lot of work on informatics as well as integrating informatics across labs. So she's learning a lot about project management and program management going forward. We'll then move into Mujib, Jordan, Krista, and Helena. You have their bios. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what they're from. I want to let them talk, and then we'll have time for questions afterwards. We're going to have coffee after that with some fika or pastries. And then we'll have the panel discussions. And I'll start off discussions by just asking the presenters some pointed questions about what they talked about, and also try and broaden the perspective a bit to open it up to you guys. But I do want you to feel comfortable interacting. So during the presentations themselves, there might be some time for a couple of questions. But as we're going through the presentations this morning, think in your own minds, what is it you really want to know about science management? What do you want to come away with from this series of presentations, this workshop? And ask how to get that information. Ask those questions. Write them down somewhere. You can ask me to ask the question if you wish. I'm happy to do that for you. So make use of the time that we're here together, because it's quite important in my mind that you come away with this really having a good idea of what it is to understand management, how to use management, where to find tools to help you manage your science going forward. A couple more things. We are recording this, so if you have any problems with recording that, please let Rosa know so she can do something funky with the recording so you're not identifiable. We appreciate the support from OBI, Ontario Brain Institute, in helping us provide some support for like coffee and donuts and so on and so forth. INCF, which Helene is part of, is going to put the slides as well as some other information on their website shortly after we're done here. We're having the video. There's also going to be a list of resources that we've pulled together that have websites as well as programs for science management that we've kind of curated over the last few months. And finally, I just want to do a shout out for the person who put this all together, Tanya Brown, who did a lot of work to pull this all together. She can't be here this morning, unfortunately. So the first thing I want to do is this audience participation. So I'm going to count to 3, and I want you to all say thank you to Tanya. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Tanya. One more time. You didn't have enough coffee. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Tanya.
Awesome. The reason she's not here is because Oakland arrived a couple weeks ago. So the other thing I want you to do on the count of 3 is say hello to Oakland. 1, 2, 3. Hello, Oakland. This is science management in action, really. One more time, okay? 1, 2, 3.
Hello, Oakland.
Thank you, great. Okay, so with that, I'll turn the podium over now to Kelly. And as I said, Kelly will talk for about 15 minutes. And then it's time for questions. We will take those questions and then move on to the next presentation.